The afternoon sun hung low over Coronado Dog Park, casting long shadows across the worn grass where military families gathered on Saturday afternoons. The Pacific breeze carried the salt tang of the ocean 3 blocks away, mixing with the laughter of children and the excited barking of dogs running free within the chain-link fence. Bryn Dalton sat alone on a weathered bench near the north corner, watching Rex patrol the perimeter with the disciplined precision of a soldier on guard duty. Even in retirement, the 9-year-old Belgian Malinois moved like the weapon he'd been trained to be. Head low, eyes scanning, muscle and sinew rippling beneath his tan and black coat. The scar on his left shoulder caught the sunlight, a 4-inch reminder of the IED blast in Kandahar that had ended both their careers. She dressed down deliberately that afternoon. Faded jeans, a plain gray t-shirt, running shoes with 300 miles on them. No insignia. No indication of what she'd been. Just another 28-year-old woman with a dog, trying to blend into the civilian world that still felt foreign after 6 months of trying. The other dog owners gave Rex a wide berth. They always did. Something in the way he carried himself, the cold calculation in his amber eyes, warned them this was not a pet. This was something else entirely. Bryn pulled her phone from her pocket, scrolled through messages she had no intention of answering. Job offers from private security firms, interview requests from podcasts and news outlets. Everyone wanted a piece of the story. First woman to complete BUD/S and serve in combat with the teams. Everyone wanted to make her a symbol, a talking point, a goddamn poster child for progress. She just wanted to be left alone. Rex's posture changed, subtle. His ears pricked forward, head tilting 15 degrees left. Bryn's own body responded before her conscious mind registered the threat. 8 years of training didn't simply disappear because you signed retirement papers. Her hand moved instinctively toward her right hip, where her Sig Sauer P226 would have been on deployment, found nothing but denim and the ghost memory of steel. 4 men entered through the south gate. Marines, even without the high and tight haircuts and the aggressive swagger. Early 20s, 3 of them built like linebackers, the 4th lean and wiry with a kind of pretty boy face that had probably gotten him into more fights than it had gotten him out of. They'd been drinking, not falling down drunk, but enough to make them loud, careless, dangerous. The pretty one held a leash attached to a massive pit bull, easily 90 pounds of muscle and poorly managed aggression. The dog lunged against its collar, foam flecking its jaws, eyes locked on a small corgi 20 feet away. Bryn stood slowly. Rex materialized at her left side without being called, positioning himself between her and the newcomers. A behavior drilled into him through thousands of hours of training. Protect, assess, wait for the command. The Marines claimed a section of grass near the center of the park, well within Rex's patrol route. The pretty one released the pit bull, which immediately charged toward a golden retriever playing with a tennis ball. The retriever's owner, an older woman in her 60s, shouted a warning that went ignored. Bryn watched the dynamic unfold with the detached precision of someone trained to read tactical situations. The Marines weren't here for their dog. They were here for the same reason young men throughout history had gathered in groups to drink and posture, to prove something to themselves and each other. The dog was just an extension of that need, a weapon they could point at the world and call sport. The pit bull reached the golden retriever and lunged. The larger dog yelped, scrambled backward, its owner screaming. The Marines laughed. Rex didn't wait for the command. 8 years of combat deployment overrode 6 months of retirement in the space between heartbeats. He crossed 40 feet of grass in under 3 seconds. A tan and black missile locked on target. The impact when he hit the pit bull sounded like a car crash. 90 pounds of aggressive dog met 85 pounds of trained military asset, and there was no contest. Rex's jaws found the pit bull's shoulder, his weight driving the larger dog to the ground with surgical precision. No wild flailing, no wasted energy, Just overwhelming, professional violence delivered with the efficiency of a machine built for exactly this purpose. The pit bull yelped once, then went still in submission. Rex held position for exactly 3 seconds, enough to establish dominance, not enough to cause serious injury, then released and backed off 2 paces, placing himself between the pit bull and the golden retriever. The park went silent, except for the crying child whose corgi had started this whole thing. Bryn crossed the grass quickly but didn't run. Running attracted attention. Running made you look guilty. She'd learned that during her first year in Iraq, watching local nationals scatter from checkpoints while the smart ones walked slow and kept their hands visible. The pretty Marine reached Rex first. His face had gone red, veins standing out on his neck like cables under tension. "Your fucking dog just attacked Brutus." Bryn stopped 10 feet away, hands loose at her sides, weight balanced. Combat stance disguised as casual posture. "Your dog attacked the retriever," she said. Her voice came out flat, emotionless. The tone she'd used giving sit reps over comms while bullets cracked overhead. Rex stopped it. "No blood, no injury. Call it a win and leash your animal." The Marine, Sergeant Stripes recently tattooed on his forearm, she noticed, stepped closer. His 3 friends spread out in a loose semicircle. Not professional tactical positioning, but the instinctive pack behavior of men who'd been in enough bar fights to know how to cut off escape routes. "Leash my animal?" The sergeant's breath stank of beer in Copenhagen. "That mutt just attacked a Marine's dog. You know what we do to dangerous animals?" Bryn's heartbeat remained steady at 60 beats per minute, the same rate it had been when she'd lined up her first shot as a sniper at 800 yards. The same rate it had been when she'd cleared her 10th building in Mosul with nothing but Rex and a Heckler & Koch HK-416. "Back off," she said. "We're leaving." She turned toward Rex, intending to clip his leash and extract before the situation escalated further. Before the civilian police showed up, and she had to explain to some beat cop why a retired SEAL had dropped 4 Marines in a dog park. The sergeant grabbed her shoulder, spun her around. Muscle memory took over. Bryn's right hand shot up, trapped his wrist, rotated outward in a basic Krav Maga disarm. Her left hand drove into his elbow, hyperextending the joint. The sergeant's knees hit grass before his brain registered what had happened. His 3 friends rushed her as one. The first one, stocky, heavily muscled, moving like a linebacker, telegraphed his punch from Ohio. Bryn slipped inside his guard, drove her elbow into his solar plexus, felt the air explode from his lungs. He folded like a camp chair. The second one had better training, combat instructor school maybe. He came in low, looking for a takedown. Bryn sprawled, caught him in a guillotine choke, used his own momentum to flip him onto his back. Her knee found his liver. He curled into a ball, retching. The third one actually made her work for it. He had a knife, a K-bar, USMC issue, probably his grandfather's. The blade caught sunlight as he slashed in a wide arc that would have opened her throat if she'd been standing where he expected. But she wasn't. She'd already moved, closing the distance before he could recover from the missed swing. Her hand locked around his wrist, twisted against the thumb, leveraged the blade free with a technique she drilled 10,000 times in the teams. The knife hit grass. Her boot drove into his knee. Cartilage popped. He screamed. The whole thing took 12 seconds. The sergeant struggled to his feet, face purple with rage and humiliation. His right hand moved toward his waistband, coming out with a folding knife. Not military issue, something cheap from a gas station, all edge and no handle. "You're fucking dead, bitch," Rex growled. Low and deep, the sound a big cat makes before it kills. The sergeant's eyes flicked toward the dog, and in that microsecond of distraction, Bryn moved. She covered 8 feet before he could raise the blade. Her left hand trapped his knife wrist. Her right hand drove into his throat just hard enough to make him gag. She swept his legs, rode him down to the grass, and had the knife in her own hand before he registered that he'd lost it. She held the blade against his carotid, feeling his pulse hammer against the steel. Her face hovered 6 inches from his, close enough that he could see the absolute emptiness in her blue eyes. The same emptiness that had looked through a scope at 73 human beings and pulled the trigger without hesitation. "Do you know what I am?" she whispered. The sergeant tried to speak, couldn't. "I'm the thing your drill instructors told you about at night. I'm the reason you salute officers you've never met. I'm 8 years of training that cost the Navy $40 million, and right now I'm deciding whether you're worth the paperwork of letting you live." She held his eyes for 3 more seconds, then released him and stood, dropping the knife in the grass beside his head. "We're done here." Sirens wailed in the distance. Someone had called the police. Good. Let them sort out which drunk Marine had started a fight with the wrong dog owner. Bryn clipped Rex's leash, started walking toward the south gate. The crowd of dog owners parted like the Red Sea, nobody making eye contact, everyone suddenly very interested in their phones. The sergeant's voice stopped her at the gate. "You're dead, bitch. You hear me? My uncle is Colonel Briggs. He runs Camp Pendleton. You just fucked up." Bryn didn't turn around, didn't acknowledge the threat, just kept walking, Rex at perfect heel position beside her, the old muscle memory carrying them both toward her truck, parked 3 blocks away. Behind her, the sergeant's voice rose to a shout. "I know, people! You're fucking dead!" The threats continued until she rounded the corner and the dog park disappeared from view. Only then did she allow herself to breathe, really breathe, pulling air deep into her lungs and pushing it out slow. Her hands didn't shake. They never shook. But her jaw ached from clenching, and her shoulders carried the tension of someone who just crossed a line she'd been trying very hard not to cross for 6 months. Civilian life. Right. She'd lasted exactly 183 days before putting 4 Marines on the ground. Her apartment sat 3 blocks from the beach in a complex that had been built in the 70s and hadn't been updated since. Second floor, corner unit, with a view of the parking lot and a sliver of ocean if you leaned out the bathroom window at the right angle. 800 square feet of beige carpet and off-white walls, and absolutely nothing that made it feel like home. She'd been sleeping on a mattress on the floor for 6 months because buying a bed frame felt too permanent. Too much like admitting she was staying. Rex drank from his bowl in the kitchen, then settled onto his bed by the window, the one piece of furniture she'd actually purchased, memory foam orthopedic support for old working dogs with bad joints. He watched her with those amber eyes that had seen everything she'd seen, survived everything she'd survived, carried scars that matched her own in all the places that mattered. Bryn pulled a beer from the refrigerator, Corona, because it reminded her of the ocean and the teams and the life she'd left behind. She twisted the cap, drank half the bottle standing at the kitchen counter, and stared at the wall where she'd hung exactly one piece of decoration. A photograph in a simple black frame. 23 men and 1 woman in desert camouflage, weapons at low ready, standing in front of a compound in Mosul. The photographer had caught them during a rare moment of downtime, actual smiles on faces that usually wore the 1,000-yard stare of operators deep in country. She could name every person in that photo, could tell you where they'd been born, what they'd done before the teams, how they liked their coffee. 3 of them were dead now, KIA at various points over the 8 years she'd served. Their names were etched on the memorial at the Naval Special Warfare Command, joined to the 208 other SEALs who'd given everything for the trident they wore. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She ignored it. 2 minutes later, it buzzed again. Same number. She declined the call, blocked it, and finished her beer. The window shattered at 9:47 p.m. The rock came through her living room window with enough force to punch through the glass and embed itself in the drywall opposite. Bryn had already moved, muscle memory dropping her into a combat crouch behind the kitchen counter, hand reaching for the cig that lived in the drawer 18 inches from her right knee. Rex barked once, sharp, aggressive, the sound he made when he detected threats during patrol. Bryn fast crawled to the window, staying below the sill line, and risked a quick look outside. 3 figures in the parking lot, faces obscured by hoodies. One of them held up a phone, filming. The other 2 spray-painted something on the side of her truck. She watched them work for 30 seconds, memorizing builds, gates, any identifying characteristics. The one with the phone moved like someone with training, military or law enforcement, the kind of tactical awareness you couldn't fake. The other 2 were civilians playing dress-up. They finished their vandalism and disappeared into a white panel van, no plates, no identifying marks, that peeled out of the parking lot heading south toward Imperial Beach. Bryn waited 5 minutes before moving to the window. Even odds they'd circle back, test to see if she'd come outside. She'd seen this play before in Ramadi, insurgents baiting patrols into ambushes. Different country, same basic psychology. When she was certain they were gone, she holstered the SIG and went outside to assess the damage. 4 words spray-painted across her truck in red. Dog killer seal bitch. The rock they'd thrown through her window had been wrapped in paper, held with a rubber band. She unfolded it carefully, checking for powders or liquids. Anthrax scares from her first deployment made her paranoid about unknown packages. The message was printed in block letters. You embarrassed Marines. We don't forget. We don't forgive. Underneath, someone had drawn a crude skull and the USMC Eagle, Globe, and Anchor. Bryn photographed everything with her phone. The graffiti, the note, the broken window. Then she called the police and waited for them to arrive with the resigned patience of someone who knew exactly how useless the report would be. The 2 officers who responded were professional, polite, and completely unhelpful. They took her statement, photographed the damage, and told her what she already knew. Without witnesses or video footage, ma'am, this is just vandalism. We'll file a report, but unless they come back and you catch them in the act. The older officer, a sergeant with 20 years on his face and a wedding ring that had worn a groove in his finger, gave her a look that said he understood more than he was saying. You prior service? Bryn nodded. What branch? Navy. The sergeant's eyes flicked to the subtle tan line on her left ring finger, where she'd worn her Naval Special Warfare insignia before retirement. Not many people would notice that detail. He did. You need anything, ma'am? You call the station directly and ask for Sergeant Kowalski. We take care of our own. After they left, Bryn spent 2 hours cleaning up broken glass and taping cardboard over the shattered window. Rex stayed close, his presence a warm weight against her leg whenever she stood still too long. At midnight, she gave up on sleep and did what she'd been trained to do when faced with an unknown threat. She gathered intelligence. Her laptop lived in a locked case under the mattress, a Panasonic Toughbook CF-31, military-grade ruggedized hardware that had survived 3 combat deployments and a near miss from an RPG in Kandahar. She booted it up, connected to the internet through a VPN that routed her traffic through servers in 7 countries, and started searching. Sergeant Colton Briggs, Camp Pendleton, 25 years old, MARSOC, Marine Special Operations Command, attached to 1st Marine Raider Battalion. 2 deployments to Afghanistan, 1 to Syria. No disciplinary actions in his official record, but his social media painted a different picture. Photos of him and his boys partying in Oceanside, gym selfies with captions about alpha males and warrior mindset. And there, buried in his tagged photos from 3 months ago, a picture of him standing next to an older man in a dress uniform, decorated with enough ribbons to cover half his chest. The caption read, Sunday dinner with Uncle Wade, best CO in the Corps, Colonel Wade Briggs, Deputy Commander, Marine Corps Base, Camp Pendleton, 52 years old, 28 years in the Corps, combat tours in Desert Storm, Iraq, Afghanistan, Bronze Star, Purple Heart, Navy Commendation Medal. On paper, he was a decorated war hero, But Bryn had learned long ago that metals, in reality, didn't always align. She dug deeper, running searches through databases she technically wasn't supposed to have access to anymore. NCIS case files, JAG investigations, Inspector General reports that should have been classified, but somehow ended up leaked to WikiLeaks, and from there to the dark corners of the internet where people like her knew how to look. And there it was, buried in a report from 18 months ago. An investigation into irregularities in weapons inventory at Camp Pendleton. 15 M4A1 rifles listed as destroyed during training exercise, but never actually logged out of the armory. The investigation had been closed for lack of evidence, but the name of the officer who'd signed off on the destruction order was right there in black and white. Colonel Wade Briggs. Bryn sat back from the laptop, her mind working through the implications. This wasn't about a dog park fight. This wasn't about some drunk Marines getting embarrassed by a woman. This was something bigger, deeper, something that smelled like the kind of corruption she'd seen during her third deployment to Iraq, when supply sergeants made themselves rich selling American gear to insurgents, who turned around and used it to kill American soldiers. Her phone rang. 3 a.m., unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her thumb the accept button. The voice on the other end was male, older, with the kind of gravel that came from decades of cigarettes and shouting orders on parade grounds. Bryn Dalton? Who's asking? Someone who knew your father. We need to talk. Tomorrow, 0800, the Brigantine on Coronado. Come alone. Bring Rex. The line went dead before she could respond. Bryn stared at the phone for a long moment, her tactical mind running through scenarios. Ambush, interrogation, recruitment, threat, help. Her father had died 20 years ago when she was 6 years old. The official story was a training accident at Fort Bragg, a parachute malfunction during a routine jump. She had fragmented memories, his voice reading her bedtime stories, the scratch of his beard when he kissed her goodnight, the smell of gun oil and salt water that clung to his uniforms. But the details had faded, worn smooth by time and the foster system that had erased most traces of her early childhood. Nobody who knew her father should still be calling her. But something in the caller's voice had carried weight. Authority, the kind of certainty that came from someone who'd operated at levels where lives depended on making the right call under pressure. She set an alarm for 6:30 and lay back on the mattress, one hand resting on Rex's shoulder, feeling the steady rise and fall of his breathing. Her cig sat on the floor within easy reach, magazine loaded, round-chambered, safety on. Outside, Coronado slept. Inside, Bryn Dalton stared at the ceiling and wondered what fresh hell awaited her when the sun came up. The Brigantine sat on the waterfront, a seafood restaurant that had been serving SEALs and their families since 1969. Bryn arrived at 7:45, early enough to scout the location, late enough that the morning crowd had thinned out. She chose a table on the patio with her back to the wall and clear sightlines to all three entrances. Rex lay at her feet, his body relaxed but his eyes tracking every person who walked past. She ordered coffee and waited. At exactly 800, a man walked through the main entrance and scanned the room with the methodical precision of someone who'd cleared 1,000 rooms in 1,000 different countries. He was tall, maybe 6'2", with shoulders that had probably been impressive 30 years ago, but had settled into the solid bulk of a man who still lifted weights but no longer gave a damn about definition. His hair was steel gray, cut high and tight, and his face carried the kind of weathering that came from decades under hostile suns. He wore civilian clothes, jeans, a chambray shirt, boots that had seen real work, but he moved like military. Not the parade ground bearing of a lifer trying to impress. The economical movement of a special operator who'd learned that every wasted motion could get you killed. His eyes found Bryn, and something in his expression shifted. Recognition, maybe, or grief. He crossed to her table and stood there for a moment, looking down at Rex with an expression that was almost reverence. "I'll be damned. That's actually him. That's Rex." Bryn's hand stayed loose on the table, 6 inches from the cig under her jacket. "You call this meeting. Start talking." The man pulled out the chair across from her and sat with the careful movements of someone whose knees had taken too many hard landings from too many helicopters. "Warrant Officer Grayson Sutherland, retired, Team 10. I taught sniper school at the Naval Special Warfare Center for 22 years. Your father and I served together in Desert Storm." Bryn's expression didn't change, but her mind was racing. Her father. Nobody had mentioned her father in years. "My father died in a training accident when I was 6. Parachute malfunction, Fort Bragg." Grayson shook his head slowly. "That's what they told you. That's what they put in the official report. But your father wasn't at Fort Bragg when he died, Bryn. He was in Iraq, Ramadi, and it wasn't an accident." The words hung in the air between them like smoke. Bryn felt something cold settle in her chest, a familiar numbness that she'd learned to recognize as her mind's way of protecting her from information that could break her if she let it. "You're saying he was KIA. I'm saying he was murdered by people wearing the same uniform. And those same people are coming after you now because you accidentally stumbled into something they've been protecting for 20 years. Grayson pulled a manila envelope from inside his jacket and slid it across the table. Inside were photographs. Her father in desert camouflage, younger than she'd ever seen him, standing with a group of SEALs in front of a bullet-scarred building. More photos, documents, reports, and there at the bottom of the stack, a photograph that made her breath catch. Her father holding a baby. The baby was wearing a onesie with a SEAL trident printed on the chest. The baby was her. "He talked about you all the time," Grayson said quietly. "Carried that photo on every deployment. Said you were the reason he did the job, the reason he stayed sharp. Because he wanted to make it home to watch you grow up." Bryn's hand trembled slightly as she picked up the photograph. She'd never seen a picture of her father holding her. The foster system had stripped away everything personal when her mother had died of an overdose 6 months after the training accident. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because you need to understand what you're up against. What happened at that dog park yesterday wasn't random. Those weren't just drunk Marines looking for a fight. That was Colonel Wade Briggs testing you, seeing how you'd react, seeing if you had the skills that would make you a threat." "A threat to what?" Grayson leaned forward, his voice dropping to just above a whisper. "Briggs is running weapons out of Pendleton, has been for 12 years. Military hardware going to cartels, militias, anyone with cash. He's made $40 million selling American weapons to America's enemies. And 20 years ago, your father discovered the same operation running out of Ramadi. He was going to blow the whistle, report it up the chain. And 2 days before he could, he took a round through the back of his head during a supposedly routine patrol." The world seemed to tilt slightly. Bryn's training kicked in, forcing her to breathe steady, to process information without emotion, to treat this like any other intelligence briefing. "You have proof of this?" "Some, enough to know it's true, not enough to take to NCIS without getting you killed. That's why I'm here, because 20 years ago I was too much of a coward to stand up for your father. I let them bury the truth. Let them call it enemy action and pin a posthumous bronze star on his coffin. And I've lived with that shame every day since." He paused and Bryn saw something break behind his eyes. "I can't give you back your father, but I can help you finish what he started. Take down Briggs. Expose the whole goddamn network. Make them pay for every life they've destroyed in the name of profit." Bryn looked down at the photograph of her father holding her infant self. 20 years of questions she'd never been able to ask suddenly crystallized into a single, burning certainty. This was why she'd become a SEAL. Not for glory or adventure or even patriotism, but because somewhere deep in her DNA, in the parts of her that couldn't be explained by training or choice, she'd been following in footsteps she'd never consciously known existed. She looked up at Grayson. "Tell me everything." The sun climbed higher over San Diego Bay as Grayson Sutherland spread documents across the table like a battlefield commander planning an assault. Bryn watched his hands move with the economical precision of someone who'd briefed 1,000 missions. His weathered fingers tapping key points on satellite photos and inventory reports that shouldn't exist outside classified databases. "Operation Iron Harvest," Grayson said, his voice low enough that the tourists 3 tables away couldn't hear. "That's what they call it internally. Started in Iraq, 2004, right after the initial invasion when chaos made it easy to lose track of weapons shipments. Your father stumbled onto it in Ramadi during his 3rd deployment. He pulled out a photocopy of a handwritten report, the ink faded but still legible. Bryn recognized the handwriting from letters her father had written to her mother, letters that had survived the foster system somehow and made their way to her when she turned 18. January 2006. He documented 30 M4 rifles that were supposed to go to Iraqi police but never arrived. Started asking questions, started watching the supply chain, and he noticed a pattern. Every shipment that went missing had one thing in common. Grayson's finger tapped a name on the bottom of a requisition form. Major Wade Briggs, logistics officer, recently promoted. He signed off on every single discrepancy. Bryn studied the documents with the analytical detachment she'd learned during intelligence briefings in Kandahar. Facts, evidence, actionable intelligence. Leave emotion at the door or it would get you killed. How did they kill him? Sniper, during a patrol through a marketplace in Ramadi. Official report says insurgent fire from a rooftop, but I talked to the corpsman who was there. He said the angle was wrong. Said the round came from behind your father, not ahead, and the weapon's signature didn't match any AK variant the insurgents were using. It was 7.62 NATO, American round. The words settled into Bryn's chest like stones. 20 years she'd believed the lie. 20 years she'd carried the image of her father dying in some training accident, a random tragedy, bad luck, and a faulty parachute. Now the truth rewrote her entire history in the span of 30 seconds. Who pulled the trigger? I don't know for certain, but Briggs had a staff sergeant named DeMarco who specialized in long-range work. Former scout sniper. He died in a motorcycle accident in 2011, 3 months before the Inspector General started looking into missing weapons at Pendleton. Convenient timing. Grayson gathered the papers back into the envelope, his jaw tight. Briggs has been running this operation for 20 years. He's expanded it, grown it into something bigger than anyone imagined. And 6 months ago, NCIS started investigating irregularities at 3 Marine bases: Pendleton, Miramar, and 29 Palms. They're calling it the largest weapons trafficking investigation in military history. But they don't have enough to move yet. Too many connected people, too much money involved, too many officers willing to look the other way. So why come to me? Because yesterday you put yourself on their radar. You showed skills that made Briggs nervous. And when I heard what happened at that dog park, I knew he'd come after you. I couldn't let that happen. Not to John Dalton's daughter. Bryn looked down at Rex, who'd been lying quietly at her feet throughout the conversation. The dog's eyes were closed, but his ears tracked every sound, every movement, always on guard, always ready. What do you want from me? Help me finish what your father started. Gather evidence. Build a case so airtight that not even the Pentagon can bury it. And when we have everything we need, we burn the whole goddamn house down. Grayson's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, his expression darkening. That's my contact at NCIS. We need to move, now. They left the brigantine and drove in separate vehicles to a property 10 miles east of Coronado, a small ranch house set back from the road on 3 acres of scrub and rocks. Grayson's truck sat in the driveway next to a restored 1967 Ford Bronco that had clearly been his retirement project. Inside, the house looked like every retired SEAL's man cave Bryn had ever seen. weapons in locked cases on the walls, challenge coins displayed in shadow boxes, photos of men in desert camouflage and dive gear, frozen moments from deployments to every shithole on Earth where America had decided to plant its flag. But it was the basement that revealed Grayson's true purpose. He'd converted the entire space into an operations center. 3 computers on a desk that looked like it had been salvaged from a Navy ship. Monitors showing news feeds, police scanners, encrypted communication channels. A tactical planning table with maps of Camp Pendleton. Satellite imagery showing warehouse locations, approach routes, security camera positions. This wasn't the hobby of a bored retiree. This was an active investigation. How long have you been working this? 3 years. Since I heard rumors that the IG was looking at Pendleton, I started digging, hacked into databases I probably shouldn't have access to. He pulled out a chair. Sit, I need to show you something. The computer screen came to life, displaying financial records, bank transfers, offshore accounts, corporate shell companies with names like Pacific Security Solutions and Blackstone Maritime Logistics. Briggs isn't working alone. He has partners, other officers at other bases, defense contractors who facilitate the transactions, and someone at the top coordinating everything. Someone with enough power to make NCIS investigations disappear. Grayson opened another file. Photos of men in expensive suits meeting in restaurants, golf courses, private yachts. Bryn recognized some of the faces from news coverage. A senator, a deputy secretary of defense, a CEO of one of the major defense contractors. Operation Iron Harvest isn't just about stealing weapons. It's about control. These people are building their own private army, their own network of influence. They sell weapons to cartels who destabilize Mexico. They sell weapons to militias who create chaos in the Middle East. And then they sell solutions to the same problems they created. More defense contracts, more funding, more power. Bryn felt the familiar cold focus settling over her mind, the same mental state she entered before a mission. Emotion locked away, logic and strategy taking over. You said you have a contact at NCIS. Who? Lieutenant Ainsley Graves. She's the lead investigator on the Pendleton case. Good agent, smart, but she's hitting walls everywhere she turns. Her supervisor keeps telling her to slow down, wait for more evidence. Meanwhile, witnesses are disappearing. Evidence is getting destroyed. She knows something's wrong, but can't prove it. Can we trust her? She's the only one I trust. Everyone else at NCIS San Diego could be compromised. That's how deep this goes. A knock at the door made both of them reach for weapons. Grayson held up a hand. That's her now. Lieutenant Ainsley Graves looked exactly like Bryn expected a military investigator to look. 35, 5'9", athletic build hidden under a conservative pantsuit, short blonde hair, minimal makeup, wedding ring that she twisted unconsciously when she was thinking. Her eyes carried the sharp intelligence of someone who'd learned to see through bullshit and lies. Those eyes locked onto Bryn with immediate recognition. You're her, the female SEAL, Bryn Dalton. Retired. Right, retired. Ainsley's tone suggested she didn't believe retirement meant much to someone with Bryn's training. Grayson filled me in on what happened at the dog park. You rattled some cages. Wasn't my intention. Doesn't matter. Colton Briggs filed a counter-complaint this morning. Says you assaulted him and 3 other Marines unprovoked. Says you threatened to kill them. His uncle is pushing for assault charges. Bryn's expression didn't change. There were witnesses, security cameras. Witnesses who don't want to get involved. And the security camera footage mysteriously corrupted. Classic Briggs move. He's done this before. Makes problems disappear. Ainsley sat down at the planning table, spreading out her own documents. But that's not why I'm here. 3 hours ago, my supervisor, Assistant Director Caldwell, pulled me into his office. Told me the Pendleton investigation is being shut down. Insufficient evidence. Resource constraints. He said we need to focus on higher priority cases. Bullshit, Grayson said. Of course it's bullshit. We have financial irregularities. We have witness testimony. We have missing weapons. But Caldwell says we can't move forward without direct evidence of trafficking, which means catching someone in the act, which means surveillance and wiretaps, which requires warrants, which requires a judge who isn't in Briggs's pocket. She looked directly at Bryn. That's where you come in. You have skills the NCIS doesn't have. You can go places we can't go, do things we can't do. And if you happen to stumble across evidence while conducting your own private investigation into who vandalized your truck, well, that's just good citizenship. You're asking me to operate outside the law. I'm asking you to help me get justice for your father and for every soldier who's been killed by weapons that were supposed to protect them. Bryn studied Ainsley's face, reading micro-expressions, looking for tells. The woman believed what she was saying, believed it with the kind of conviction that made people take risks that could destroy their careers. What do you need? Over the next hour, they built a plan. Target, a warehouse in the industrial district near Camp Pendleton, where Grayson's surveillance had documented suspicious activity. Trucks coming and going at odd hours. Armed guards. Crates being loaded and unloaded by men in civilian clothes who moved with military precision. Objective, penetrate the warehouse, document what was inside, gather evidence that could be used to force NCIS to reopen the investigation. Timeline, tonight. Briggs would be expecting Bryn to lawyer up, to go defensive. He wouldn't expect her to go on the offensive within 24 hours of the dog park incident. Grayson pulled up satellite imagery of the warehouse on his computer. Single-story structure, concrete and steel, 3 entrances, north, south, and east. West side backs up to a drainage canal. Security is minimal during the day. Civilian rent-a-cops. But at night they bring in contractors, former military, heavily armed. How many? 4 to 6. They rotate shifts. Weakest point is during changeover, around 2,200 hours. You'll have maybe a 10-minute window when they're distracted. Bryn studied the layout, her tactical mind automatically planning approach routes, breach points, exfiltration paths. 8 years of doing this in cities where people were actively trying to kill her made a San Diego warehouse seem almost easy. I'll need equipment. Grayson smiled for the first time since she'd met him. Follow me. The garage attached to his house had been converted into an armory that would make most military units jealous. Rifles racked on the walls, pistols in locked cases, body armor, night vision equipment, communications gear, everything a small assault team would need to conduct operations. Most of this is legal, some of it isn't, all of it works. He pulled down a Remington 700 rifle from the wall, the stock worn smooth from years of use. This was your father's, his primary weapon during his sniper training. After he died, I kept it. Told myself I'd give it to you someday. Guess today's that day. Bryn took the rifle, feeling its weight, its balance. The scope was a Schmidt and Bender 3 to 12 times 50. Top-of-the-line glass from 15 years ago, still better than most modern optics. The trigger broke clean at 3 pounds. The barrel showed the careful maintenance of someone who understood that a sniper rifle was a precision instrument, not just a weapon. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. You might be cursing my name before this is over. They spent the next 4 hours preparing. Bryn field stripped and cleaned the Remington, checking every component, building a new dope card based on the current barrel and ammunition. Grayson assembled her kit, body armor, communications rig, night vision monocular, tactical flashlight, zip ties, emergency medical supplies. Ainsley provided intelligence updates, guard rotation schedules, recent police activity in the area, weather forecast, clear skies, new moon, perfect conditions for low visibility operations. At 1800 hours, Grayson brought down 2 more people. The first was a man in his early 60s, built like a fire hydrant, with hands the size of dinner plates and a face that looked like it had stopped more punches than a boxing gym's heavy bag. He wore a faded Team Guy t-shirt and jeans that had motor oil permanently worked into the denim. Thaddeus Kirkland, everyone calls me Hammer, demo and breaching, served with your father in Desert Storm in Iraq. The second man was taller, leaner, with the careful movements of someone who'd spent years working on bodies in field conditions where morphine and hope were the only anesthetics. Silver hair pulled back in a ponytail, reading glasses hanging from a chain around his neck. Fletcher Ramsey, Doc. I was the corpsman attached to your father's team. Stitched him up more times than I can count. Both men looked at her with expressions that mixed grief and determination. They'd known her father, served with him, and they'd spent 20 years believing the lie. Grayson told us what you're doing tonight, Hammer said. We're in. Your father saved my life in Fallujah. I owe him this. Same, Doc added. John Dalton was the best man I ever served with. Time to balance the books. Bryn felt something shift in her chest. For 20 years she'd been alone. No family, no history, no connection to the father she'd never known. And now, suddenly, she had a team, men who'd fought beside John Dalton and were willing to fight for his daughter. I work alone. Not tonight, you don't. Grayson's tone left no room for argument. You're good, maybe as good as your father was, but you're going into hostile territory against professional operators who have home field advantage. You need backup. You need overwatch. You need people who pull you out if this goes sideways. Bryn wanted to argue, wanted to say she'd been doing this for 8 years, that she didn't need help, that bringing more people just created more opportunities for things to go wrong. But she looked at their faces and saw the same expression she'd seen in her teammates before missions. Determination, loyalty, the unspoken promise that they had each other's backs, no matter what came through the door. What's your plan? She asked. Grayson pulled up the satellite imagery again. You and I go in. Your primary breach and recon. I'm overwatch with comms. Hammer stays mobile in a vehicle outside, ready for emergency extraction. Doc sets up a casualty collection point a quarter-mile away. Ainsley monitors police scanners and provides early warning if law enforcement gets called. What about Rex? Rex stays with Doc. If this goes bad, someone needs to take care of him. Bryn looked down at the dog who'd been with her through 4 deployments, who'd saved her life in Kandahar, who was the only constant in a world that kept changing. If I don't come back, he's yours. All of you. Take care of him. You're coming back, Grayson said flatly. That's not negotiable. At 21:30 hours, they loaded into 2 vehicles. Grayson's truck with Bryn riding passenger, Hammer following in the Bronco with Doc. Ainsley would coordinate from Grayson's house, monitoring communications and providing real-time intelligence. The warehouse sat in an industrial park 20 minutes from Pendleton, surrounded by other anonymous buildings that housed auto repair shops and plumbing suppliers and small manufacturing operations. During the day, it would be busy with workers and deliveries. At night, it was a ghost town, streetlights creating pools of yellow illumination, separated by vast stretches of darkness. Perfect for people who wanted to move things without being seen. Grayson parked the truck a quarter-mile away, tucked behind a closed Mexican restaurant. Bryn changed into operational gear in the back seat, black cargo pants, tight-fitting black long-sleeve shirt, plate carrier with ceramic plates front and back, thigh holster with her SIG P226, the Remington 700 slung across her back. She caught Grayson watching her in the rearview mirror. You look like him. When you move, when you check your gear, same economy of motion, same focus. Tell me something about him, something I wouldn't know. Grayson was quiet for a moment, staring out the windshield at nothing. He was terrified of you, of being a father. Used to say he had no business raising a kid when he spent half his life overseas killing people. But then he'd show everyone that photo. You in that SEAL onesie, and his whole face would change, like you were the only good thing he'd ever done. Bryn felt pressure building behind her eyes, pushed it down, locked it away. She could grieve later. Right now she had a mission. Let's go to work. They moved through the darkness like ghosts, staying low, using shadows and terrain for concealment. Bryn led, Grayson 20 meters behind, both of them communicating through hand signals, learned in the same schools, drilled through the same scenarios. The warehouse loomed ahead, a dark rectangle against the slightly lighter sky. Bryn pulled the night vision monocular down over her right eye, the world shifting to shades of green. Two guards visible on the north side, smoking cigarettes near a personnel door. Contractor types, plate carriers, AR-15 pattern rifles, not amateurs. She keyed her radio, 2 clicks. Grayson responded with 3. Proceed with caution. Bryn circled wide, approaching from the west where the drainage canal provided cover. The concrete channel was dry this time of year, filled with shopping carts and trash, and the skeletal remains of a homeless encampment. She dropped into it, moved along the bottom, came up behind the warehouse's west wall. No windows on this side, just solid concrete and a ventilation shaft that fed into the building's HVAC system. She'd studied the architectural plans Grayson had obtained through sources he wouldn't specify. The shaft led to a mechanical room in the northwest corner. From there, access to the main warehouse floor. Bryn pulled a compact multi-tool from her vest, removed the ventilation cover, and slipped inside. The shaft was tight, 18 inches wide, maybe 20 tall. Barely enough room for her to low-crawl forward, the Remington scraping against metal with every movement. She moved slowly, controlling her breathing, fighting the claustrophobia that tried to claw its way up her throat. 40 feet of crawling through darkness and dust and the smell of oil and chemicals. Then the shaft opened into a larger space, dim light filtering through gaps in the mechanical room door. Bryn eased out of the shaft, found herself in a room filled with furnaces and pumps and electrical panels. The mechanical hum covered any noise she made. She moved to the door, cracked it open, and looked into the warehouse beyond. The space was massive. High ceilings supported by steel beams, loading dock doors on the east side, and in the center, arranged in neat rows like a military supply depot, wooden crates stenciled with official markings. Property of U.S. government, Department of Defense, for official use only. Bryn counted quickly, 40 crates, maybe 50, each one large enough to hold rifles or ammunition or explosives. She keyed her radio. I'm inside, multiple crates, DOD markings, moving to confirm contents. Copy, Grayson's voice came back. Be advised, vehicle approaching from the south, unknown make and model, could be shift change. Bryn moved quickly to the nearest crate, using a pry bar from her kit to lever open the top. The wood creaked, but gave way. Inside, M4A1 rifles, 20 of them, packed in protective foam, still wrapped in factory plastic. Each one had a serial number stamped into the lower receiver. Each one was supposed to be locked in an armory somewhere, logged and tracked and accounted for. Instead, they were here, waiting to be sold to whoever had the money. She photographed everything with a camera built into her chest rig. Serial numbers, DOD markings, the open crate. Then she moved to the next one. This one held ammunition, 5.56 NATO, military specification, manufactured at Lake City Army Ammunition Plant. Thousands of rounds, enough to supply a small army. The next crate, grenades, M67 fragmentation, the kind that got cleared through layers of approval and were supposed to be used only in combat zones under strict rules of engagement. Bryn felt cold rage building in her chest. Every weapon here represented American taxpayer dollars. Every weapon here could end up killing American soldiers, American police, American civilians. And the men responsible were getting rich while people like her father died trying to stop them. Reaper, you need to move. That vehicle is a black Suburban. 3 men getting out. They're heading your way. Bryn closed the crate she'd been examining, moved back toward the mechanical room. But before she could reach it, voices echoed through the warehouse. Men entering through the loading dock entrance. Told Briggs we need to move this shipment tonight. Border Patrol is doing extra checkpoints all week. Relax, we've got people on the inside. They'll wave us through like always. Bryn froze behind a stack of crates, controlling her breathing, listening to their positions. 3 men, spreading out to check the warehouse. Professional, methodical. They'd done this before. One of them walked past her position, close enough that she could see the tattoo on his forearm. A MARSOC Raider insignia. These weren't rent-a-cops, these were operators. She waited until he passed, then ghost-stepped toward the mechanical room. Almost made it, but the man stopped, turned back, his hand going to the radio on his vest. Hey, did someone leave this door open? He was looking at the mechanical room entrance. The door Bryn had failed to fully close. The other 2 men converged on his position, weapons coming up to ready positions. One of them keyed his radio. We might have a breach, checking now. Bryn had maybe 5 seconds before they opened that door and found her. 5 seconds to decide between hiding and hoping they didn't search thoroughly, or taking them out and creating a situation that would bring every armed man in the area down on her position. She chose option 3. The SIG came out of her holster smooth and fast, muscle memory from 10,000 draws on 10,000 ranges. She stepped out from behind the crates, weapon up, voice calm and cold. Federal agent, down on the ground, now. The lie bought her maybe 2 seconds of confusion, long enough for her to put the laser sight on the closest man's chest, long enough for them to see she had tactical advantage in training. Not long enough. The man on the right broke for cover, his hand grabbing his radio. Bryn put 2 rounds through his thigh, dropping him without killing him. Screaming would bring help, but not as fast as a radio call. The other 2 scattered, returning fire. Rounds cracked past her head, punched into crates behind her. She dove behind a forklift, came up shooting, controlled pairs at center mass. 1 man went down. The 3rd made it to cover behind a stack of pallets. Grayson's voice erupted in her ear. Reaper, I've got multiple vehicles incoming. You need to exfil now. Bryn low-crawled toward the mechanical room, bullets tracking her movement, sparking off concrete. She made it to the doorway, turned, and laid down suppressive fire. 6 rounds. 8. The slide locked back on an empty magazine. She reloaded while moving, muscle memory from thousands of hours on the range, making it automatic. New magazine in, slide release, weapon up. Back into the ventilation shaft, crawling fast now, not caring about noise. Behind her, the warehouse erupted with activity. Men shouting, orders being barked, the sound of vehicles screeching to stops outside. She made it to the shaft's exit, dropped into the drainage canal, and ran. Grayson met her 50 meters away, both of them sprinting through the darkness toward his truck. Did you get what we need? Got it. Weapons, ammo, grenades, all DOD property, all illegal as hell. They reached the truck. Hammer had the engine running, Doc in the passenger seat with a medical kit open on his lap. Bryn dove into the back, Grayson right behind her. Go, go, go! The Bronco's tires screamed as Hammer punched the accelerator. Behind them, headlights swept across the industrial park. Men with rifles poured out of the warehouse. But by the time they organized pursuit, the Bronco had already turned onto the main road. Just another vehicle in the late-night traffic. They drove in silence for 10 minutes, taking random turns, doubling back, making sure they weren't followed. When Grayson was satisfied they were clear, he turned to Bryn. You're bleeding. She looked down. A round had grazed her left arm, cutting through her shirt, leaving a shallow furrow in her bicep. She hadn't even felt it during the fight. Doc twisted around in his seat. Let me see. It's nothing. Let me see anyway. She rolled up her sleeve. Doc examined the wound with professional efficiency, cleaning it with antiseptic that burned like liquid fire, applying butterfly closures and a pressure dressing. You'll live, but you need to be more careful. You're not invincible, no matter what the team's taught you. Back at Grayson's house, they downloaded the footage from Bryn's camera. Ainsley watched with the focused intensity of a prosecutor building a case. This is good. Serial numbers we can trace. DOD markings we can verify. But it's not enough. Any halfway decent lawyer will argue entrapment or illegal search. We need something that ties Briggs directly to the operation. We need him on record. We need a confession. Grayson pulled up surveillance footage from the warehouse, timestamped from 3 days earlier. It showed a black SUV pulling up to the loading dock, a man in civilian clothes stepping out. Even on grainy security camera footage, Bryn recognized the face. Colonel Wade Briggs. He was there, Ainsley said. He was physically present at the warehouse. That's conspiracy. That's direct involvement. But it's still not enough for a conviction. He'll say he was conducting an inspection. He'll have a dozen alibis. We need more. Bryn's phone buzzed. Unknown number. She almost ignored it, but something made her answer. The voice on the other end was familiar. The pretty boy sergeant from the dog park, Colton Briggs. Enjoying your night, bitch? Because I know what you did. My uncle knows what you did. And now you're not just some annoying vet we need to scare off. You're a federal crime. Breaking and entering. Assault with a deadly weapon. You're looking at 20 years. You're running weapons to cartels. I have proof. I have photographs. And I'm taking it to every news outlet in the country. Colton laughed. Go ahead, try it. See what happens. My uncle has friends everywhere. NCIS, FBI, judges, prosecutors. You think you can beat that? You think one dyke with a camera can take down an operation that's been running for 20 years? I'm John Dalton's daughter, and I'm going to finish what he started. The line went quiet for a long moment. Dalton, that SEAL who got himself killed in Ramadi. Yeah, Uncle Wade told me about him. Said he was a self-righteous prick who couldn't mind his own business. Said killing him was easier than swatting a fly. Bryn's hand tightened on the phone until the plastic creaked. Where's your uncle right now? Why, you gonna try something? You got balls, I'll give you that. But you're out of your depth. This isn't Iraq. This isn't some compound you can breach with your team buddies. This is America. And in America, people like us own people like you. Tell your uncle I'm coming for him. Tell him John Dalton's daughter is going to put him in Leavenworth for the rest of his life. She ended the call and looked at the team assembled around her. Grayson, Hammer, Doc, Ainsley, people who'd known her father, people who believed in justice enough to risk everything. We're done playing defense. Time to take this fight to them. Time to make Briggs come to us, on our terms, in a place where we have the advantage. Grayson smiled grimly. Now you sound like your father. He always said the best defense is a violent offense. What did you have in mind? Bryn looked at the photograph of her infant self in her father's arms. We set a trap. We bait Briggs into a confrontation where he thinks he has the advantage. And then we take everything from him. His operation, his freedom, his legacy. And how do we do that? We make him think I have something he can't afford to let the world see. Evidence that would destroy not just him, but everyone connected to Iron Harvest. We make him desperate, and desperate men make mistakes. Ainsley pulled up a map of San Diego County on her laptop. We'd need the right location, somewhere isolated, somewhere we can control the environment. Grayson pointed to a spot on the map. There, abandoned naval facility near the border. Used to be a communications station during the Cold War. Been shut down for 20 years. No civilians, no cameras. And I know every inch of it from conducting training exercises there in the 90s. They spent the next 3 hours planning. Bryn felt the familiar rhythm of pre-mission preparation settling over her. The calm focus, the attention to detail, the understanding that every decision made now could mean the difference between success and body bags. At 0300, exhaustion finally caught up with her. Grayson showed her to a guest room where Rex was waiting. his tail wagging slowly when she walked through the door. She collapsed onto the bed fully clothed, one hand resting on Rex's shoulder. The dog's breathing slowed, steadied, pulled her down towards sleep. But before unconsciousness claimed her, one thought burned bright in her mind. Tomorrow they'd set the trap. Tomorrow they'd lure Briggs into the open. And tomorrow, 20 years of lies and corruption would finally face justice. Her father would have been proud. Dawn broke over Grayson's ranch with a kind of crystalline clarity that made snipers grateful and targets nervous. Bryn woke at 5:30, her internal clock more reliable than any alarm, and found Rex already awake beside her, watching the door with patient vigilance. The dog's presence was a constant she'd learned to depend on more than anything else in her life. She dressed quickly and found Grayson in the kitchen, coffee already brewing, satellite photos of the abandoned naval facility spread across the table like a tactical chessboard. He looked like he hadn't slept, but his eyes were sharp, focused. The eyes of a man who'd planned 1,000 missions and knew that details save lives. Coffee's fresh, scrambled eggs on the stove if you want them. Bryn poured herself a mug, black, no sugar. The coffee tasted like every military installation she'd ever been stationed at. Strong enough to strip paint, hot enough to burn, bitter enough to wake the dead. How long have you been up? Never went to sleep, too much to plan, too many variables. He tapped one of the photos. I called Hammer and Doc at 0400. They're gathering equipment. Ainsley's working the NCIS database, trying to identify everyone in Briggs' network. We need to know who might show up when we spring this trap. Bryn studied the facility layout. 3 buildings arranged in a rough triangle around a central courtyard. The main communications building was 4 stories, concrete and steel, built to withstand anything short of a direct nuclear strike. 2 smaller structures flanked it, probably housing and support facilities back when the place was operational. What's the current status of the facility? Officially abandoned. DoD handed it over to the county in 2008, but nobody wanted it. Too remote, too expensive to demolish, too contaminated with old electronics and asbestos to repurpose. So it just sits there. Homeless sometimes use it for shelter. Kids use it for paintball, but mostly it's empty. Security? Chain link fence, mostly falling apart. A few no trespassing signs. Nothing that would stop anyone determined to get inside. Perfect. Bryn traced approach routes with her finger. We set up here, on the main building's roof. 4 stories gives us elevation advantage. Clear fields of fire in every direction. And if we need to bug out, we've got multiple egress points. What about Briggs? How do we make sure he shows up? We send him a message he can't ignore. Evidence that his whole operation is about to be exposed. But we make him think he can stop it if he moves fast enough. Grayson's phone buzzed. He checked the screen, and his expression went dark. That's Ainsley. She says we have a problem. They drove to NCIS headquarters in separate vehicles, Bryn following Grayson's truck through early morning traffic. The sun climbed higher, burning off the marine layer, revealing a perfect Southern California day that felt obscene given what they were planning. Ainsley met them in the parking garage, looking like she'd slept even less than Grayson. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her hair pulled back in a hasty ponytail, and she clutched a tablet like it might explode if she let go. My supervisor called me in at 0530. Assistant Director Caldwell. He told me the Pendleton investigation is officially closed. He's reassigning me to fraud cases, white-collar stuff. He said the weapons trafficking angle didn't have merit. That's bullshit, Grayson said. Of course it's bullshit, but it gets worse. She pulled up a file on her tablet. I ran backgrounds on everyone in Caldwell's chain of command, cross-referenced them with Briggs's known associates, and I found something. The screen showed a photograph from 6 months ago. 2 men on a golf course, both smiling, both holding drinks. One was Colonel Wade Briggs in civilian clothes. The other was Assistant Director Marcus Caldwell. They're friends, have been for 15 years. Both served in Iraq during the same period. both transferred to San Diego within months of each other. And this, she swiped to a financial record. Bank transfer, $50,000 from an offshore account to Caldwell's personal checking account. Date, 3 weeks ago. That's a payoff. That's my boss being paid off by the man I'm investigating, which means NCIS is compromised from the top, which means we can't trust anyone in the building, which means I'm probably going to prison for what I'm about to do. Bryn studied the younger woman's face, seeing the fear there but also the determination. The kind of resolve that made people risk everything for what they believed was right. You don't have to be part of this. You can walk away. We'll understand. Ainsley laughed, sharp and bitter. Walk away? My boss is taking bribes from arms dealers. My agency is covering up the murder of a Navy SEAL. And you're telling me I can walk away? She shook her head. My father was a Marine, died in Fallujah in 2004. He believed in duty and honor, in doing the right thing even when it cost you everything. I can't walk away. I won't. Then we do this together, Bryn said. All of us. And we burn the whole goddamn house down. Back at Grayson's ranch, they spent the morning turning theory into operational reality. Hammer arrived at 900 driving a truck loaded with enough weapons and equipment to outfit a small platoon. Doc came an hour later with medical supplies that went far beyond basic first aid. If this goes sideways, Doc said, unpacking trauma kits and surgical equipment, we're going to need more than Band-Aids and aspirin. They laid everything out in Grayson's garage like they were planning an overseas deployment. Weapons first. Bryn's Remington 700 with 300 rounds of match-grade ammunition. 2 M4A1 carbines with ACOG optics. Grayson's personal HK416 that he'd somehow acquired after retirement. Half a dozen pistols, fragmentation grenades, smoke grenades, flashbangs. Body armor came next. Level 4 ceramic plates that could stop rifle rounds. Tactical vests with magazine pouches and radio pockets. Kevlar helmets, the kind of gear that turns civilians into warriors. Communications equipment, encrypted radios on military frequencies, satellite phone for backup, portable cell jammer in case Briggs tried to call for reinforcements. And finally, the bait. A laptop loaded with fabricated evidence that looked like the real thing. Financial records showing the full scope of Operation Iron Harvest. Names, dates, transactions. Everything a prosecutor would need to bring down not just Briggs, but dozens of co-conspirators. Of course, most of it was fake. Ainsley had spent 3 hours that morning creating documents that would pass casual inspection, but wouldn't hold up to serious forensic analysis. But Briggs wouldn't know that. He'd see evidence that could destroy him and everyone connected to him, and he'd do whatever it took to get it back. At 1300, they gathered around the planning table for final briefing. Grayson took point, his voice carrying the authority of someone who'd commanded men in combat. Mission objective: lure Briggs and his people to the abandoned naval facility, capture them on video admitting to their crimes. Turn that evidence over to federal prosecutors who aren't compromised. Rules of engagement: we don't fire first, but we sure as hell finish it. Questions? What about collateral damage? Hammer asked. Briggs won't come alone. He'll bring contractors, former military, people just doing a job. Then we give them every chance to surrender. But if they choose to fight, we put them down. This is war. Has been since they killed John Dalton 20 years ago. We're just finishing it. Bryn checked her watch. 1315. The message goes out at 1400. That gives Briggs 4 hours to organize a response. Figure he moves at dark, around 1800. We need to be in position by 1700 at the latest. What's the message? Doc asked. Ainsley pulled out a burner phone, already loaded with a video file. This. She played it. The video showed Bryn sitting in what looked like a motel room, the laptop open in front of her, her face clearly visible. Colonel Briggs, I have evidence of your weapons trafficking operation. Names, dates, financial records, everything. I'm going to the media in 6 hours unless you meet with me. Come alone. We'll make a deal. You walk away from this, I walk away from you. But if you don't show, this all goes public. Your choice. She gave coordinates for the naval facility and a time, 1900 hours. It's good, Grayson said. Believable. You look scared enough to make a deal, but determined enough that he'll think you're serious. I am serious, just not about the deal. At 1400 exactly, Ainsley sent the video from an untraceable email account to 3 addresses. Briggs's official USMC email, his personal Gmail, and his cell phone. Then she destroyed the burner phone and threw the pieces into 3 different dumpsters on the drive back to Grayson's ranch. Now they waited. The hardest part of any operation was always the waiting. Your father used to say he was fighting so you could grow up in a world where people didn't have to be afraid. He died when I was 6. I barely remember him. Maybe, but you carry him with you. The way you move, the way you think. That's not training, that's blood. That's DNA. You're your father's daughter in all the ways that matter. At 16:30, Grayson's phone rang. He answered, listened for 30 seconds, and hung up. That was my contact at Pendleton. Briggs left base at 15:45 with 6 vehicles, 20 to 15 personnel. All contractors, all heavily armed. They're coming. The team loaded into 2 vehicles. Grayson drove his truck with Bryn riding shotgun and Rex in the back seat. Hammer and Doc followed in the Bronco with all the equipment that wouldn't fit in the truck. Ainsley stayed at the ranch, monitoring communications and ready to call for backup if everything went completely sideways. The abandoned naval facility sat 30 miles southeast of San Diego, close enough to the border that you could see Mexico from the roof. They arrived at 1700 with the sun starting its descent toward the Pacific, golden light painting the desert in shades of amber and rust. The place looked exactly like every abandoned military installation Bryn had ever seen. Chain-link fence with gaps big enough to drive through. Buildings tagged with graffiti. Windows shattered. Weeds growing through cracks in the asphalt. The bones of American power left to rot under an indifferent sun. They drove through one of the gaps in the fence and parked both vehicles behind the smallest building, out of sight from the main approach. Then they began the methodical process of turning a ruin into a fortress. Grayson and Bryn climbed to the roof of the main communications building, hauling equipment up 4 flights of stairs that felt like they might collapse with each step. The roof was flat, 40 yards square, with a 3-foot parapet that would provide cover and concealment. Bryn set up her sniper position on the southwest corner, the Remington 700 on a bipod, spare magazines within easy reach. From here she had clear sight lines to every approach. The main gate 400 yards south, the eastern fence line 350 yards, the northern access road 500 yards out. She built a range card, recording exact distances to key points. Checked her scopes 0. Calculated adjustments for wind and temperature. The muscle memory of 1,000 training evolutions carrying her through the process with mechanical precision. Grayson set up 20 feet away with his HK-416 and a spotting scope. His job was to call wind, identify targets, and serve as Bryn's backup if things went kinetic. On the ground level, Hammer positioned himself in the second building with a clear view of the courtyard. He had an M4A1 and enough explosives to bring down the whole facility if necessary. Doc was in the third building with medical supplies and a radio, ready to move to wherever he was needed. At 17:45, Bryn's radio crackled. Overwatch, this is ground. All positions set, ready for company. Copy, ground. Overwatch is set, now we wait. The sun touched the horizon at 1812. Shadows lengthened. The temperature dropped. Desert twilight turned the world into a study of contrasts. Harsh light and deep shadow, nothing in between. At 1847, Grayson's spotting scope caught movement. Vehicle approaching from the south. Black Suburban, 500 yards and closing. Bryn put her eye to the scope, tracking the SUV as it navigated through the broken fence and entered the facility grounds. It stopped in the center of the courtyard, engine running, doors staying closed. They're being cautious, checking for ambush. Smart. Briggs didn't get this far by being stupid. Two more Suburbans entered the facility, taking up positions that gave them overlapping fields of fire. Professional tactical positioning. These weren't amateurs. The doors opened. Men stepped out in full tactical gear, plate carriers, helmets, rifles at low ready. Bryn counted 12 total. Former military, every one of them, moving with the economy of motion that came from years of training. And then Colonel Wade Briggs stepped out of the center vehicle. He was 52 but looked older, stress and corruption adding years that physical fitness couldn't hide. He wore civilian clothes, jeans, polo shirt, leather jacket, but carried himself with the rigid posture of a career officer. Even from 400 yards away through a rifle scope, Bryn could see the arrogance in his bearing. Briggs surveyed the facility like he owned it, like he owned everything. The kind of man who'd grown so accustomed to power that he'd forgotten it could be taken away. He pulled out a phone, dialed, waited. Bryn's burner phone rang. She'd left it in the first-floor lobby, sitting on a desk where Briggs' people would find it if they searched. She'd rigged a camera to watch it, feeding video to a tablet Grayson held. On the screen, they watched a contractor pick up the phone, carry it to Briggs. The colonel put it to his ear. "Miss Dalton, I'm here, as requested, alone, as you can see." Grayson keyed a pre-recorded message they'd prepared. Bryn's voice, synthesized through a voice modulator to sound like it was coming through a bad connection. "I'm watching you, Colonel. You brought 12 armed men. That's not alone. That's an execution squad." Briggs smiled, cold and predatory. "Can you blame me? You broke into my warehouse. You assaulted my people. You stole classified information. Did you really think I'd come here without insurance? The same way you had insurance when you killed my father?" The smile disappeared. "Your father was a bleeding heart who didn't understand the game. He thought honor and duty mattered more than survival. He was wrong, and he paid the price for being wrong. You had him shot, in Ramadi, made it look like enemy action." Briggs laughed, genuinely amused. "Is that what you think? That I personally arranged the death of one SEAL in a war zone where people died every day? You give me too much credit. Your father died because he was in the wrong place at the wrong time, because the people I work for needed him gone, and because ultimately he didn't matter. None of you matter. You're all just cogs in a machine bigger than you can imagine." "Then let me imagine. Tell me about Operation Iron Harvest. Tell me about the 20 years of weapons trafficking. Tell me about the $40 million. Why would I do that? Because I have evidence that can destroy you, and I'm offering you a deal. Walk away from this, retire, disappear, and I keep the evidence to myself. But if you don't, if you try to kill me like you killed my father, then everything goes public. Everything. And you spend the rest of your life in Leavenworth." Briggs considered this, his face calculating. "Show me the evidence." "It's in the main building, 4th floor, north side, laptop with everything. But you come alone. No guns, no backup, just you and me. We talk. We make a deal. Everyone walks away. You must think I'm an idiot. I think you're a survivor, and survivors know when to cut their losses." A long pause. Briggs looked up at the building, his eyes scanning windows, looking for threats. He was too far away to see Bryn's position, especially with the sun setting behind her, putting her in shadow. "All right, I'll go in, but my men stay out here, and if I'm not back in 15 minutes, they burn this whole place to the ground, with you in it." "Fair enough." Briggs handed his phone to one of his contractors, shrugged out of his jacket, and pulled a pistol from a shoulder holster. He dropped the weapon on the hood of the Suburban. Then he started walking toward the main building. Bryn watched him through the scope, crosshairs centered on his chest. One shot, 400 yards. She could end him right now. End the threat. Avenge her father. But that wasn't the mission. The mission was evidence, confession, justice, not revenge. Grayson's voice was soft in her ear. I know what you're thinking. Don't. We do this right. I know. Briggs entered the building. They tracked him on security cameras Ainsley had installed during the setup. First floor, stairs to the second, then the third, moving cautiously but not fearfully. A man who'd been in enough dangerous situations to know how to handle himself. He reached the fourth floor and found the laptop sitting on a desk in an office that still had furniture from its Cold War days. He opened it, began scrolling through the fabricated evidence. And that's when everything went to hell. The explosion came from the east side of the facility, a concussive blast that shook the building and sent a fireball climbing into the darkening sky. Bryn's head snapped around, saw one of the smaller buildings engulfed in flames. Hammer! Doc! Report! Static on the radio. Then Doc's voice, strained. We're hit. Secondary team came in from the east. At least 8 hostiles. They had RPGs. Hammer's building is gone. I don't know if he made it out. On the ground, Briggs's contractors were moving, fanning out, converging on the burning building. And more vehicles were pouring through the fence. Not Suburbans, technical trucks, mounted machine guns. This wasn't a negotiation team. This was an assault force. Grayson cursed. Briggs set us up. He never intended to deal. He brought 2 teams, one to distract, one to flank. Bryn keyed her radio. Doc, get to the rally point. We're extracting. Negative, Hammer's still in there. I'm not leaving him. Doc! Gunfire erupted. Full automatic, heavy caliber, the distinctive roar of a .50 caliber machine gun. Rounds tore through the building where Doc was positioned, punching through walls like they were paper. Bryn made a decision. The kind of decision her father would have made, the kind that separated SEALs from everyone else. Grayson, you're on Overwatch. I'm going down there. That's suicide. That's a teammate. That's family. She grabbed her rifle, slung it across her back, and ran for the stairs. 4 flights down, taking them 3 at a time, her boots hammering on concrete. Behind her, Grayson's HK-416 opened up, suppressive fire keeping the contractors' heads down. Bryn hit the ground floor and sprinted across the courtyard. Bullets cracked past her head, kicked up dust at her feet. She didn't slow down, didn't serpentine, just ran straight and fast because speed was armor and hesitation was death. She made it to Doc's building and found him crouched behind an overturned desk, blood running down the side of his face from a shrapnel wound. I told you to extract. And I told you I don't leave people behind. Where's Hammer? There. Through the smoke and flames, Bryn saw him. Hammer was dragging himself out of the burning building, his left leg twisted at an angle that meant broken bones. 2 contractors were closing on his position, weapons raised. Bryn brought the Remington up. No time for perfect position, firing from standing. The scope showed her target's face. Young, maybe 25, someone's son, someone's brother. She pulled the trigger. The rifle bucked. The man went down. Second shot, second target, center mass. He dropped. Bryn ran to Hammer, grabbed him under the arms, started dragging him toward cover. He was heavy, dead weight, groaning with every movement. Doc appeared beside her, taking Hammer's other arm, both of them hauling him away from the flames. They made it behind a concrete barrier just as the machine gun found their position again. Rounds hammered into the concrete, throwing chips and dust. The barrier was thick, but wouldn't last forever. We're pinned, Doc shouted over the gunfire. Bryn's mind raced through options. They were in a kill box, caught between the burning building and superior firepower. No way out except through the enemy. Or above them. She keyed her radio. Grayson, I need danger close fire on the eastern vehicles. Everything you've got. You're too close. Do it. 3 seconds later, the HK-416 opened up from the rooftop. Controlled bursts, surgical precision, rounds walking across the technical trucks. Tires exploded, windshields shattered. The machine gunner took a round through the shoulder and fell from his mount. The suppressive fire bought them 10 seconds. Bryn used every one of them. She grabbed Hammer's rifle, laid down her own covering fire while Doc hauled their wounded man toward the rally point. Then she was up and moving, bounding back, firing and moving, firing and moving, the rhythm drilled into her through 8 years of combat. They made it to the vehicles, Hammer in the back of the Bronco, Doc working on him with practiced efficiency. Bryn jumped into Grayson's truck, started the engine. "Grayson, we're extracting. Get down here." "Negative. I'm staying." "That's not..." "Briggs is still in the building. He's trying to escape through the north side. I can cut him off." Bryn looked up at the communications building and saw him. Colonel Wade Briggs, running along the third-floor catwalk, heading for an external staircase. She made another decision, the kind her father would have made. "Doc, get Hammer to the hospital. I'm going after Briggs." She grabbed the Remington, loaded a fresh magazine, and sprinted back toward the communications building. Behind her, the Bronco's engine roared to life, tires throwing gravel as Doc drove their wounded man to safety. Bryn hit the stairs running. First floor, second, third. Her lungs burned, her legs screamed, but she didn't slow down. She reached the third-floor catwalk just as Briggs made it to the external stairs. He turned, saw her, and his hand went to his waistband. He'd lied about being unarmed. The pistol came up fast. Bryn dove sideways as he fired. The round passed through the space where her head had been a microsecond earlier. So close she felt the supersonic crack. She rolled, came up with a Remington, but he was already moving, disappearing down the external stairs. She followed, taking the steps 3 at a time, the rifle heavy in her hands. At ground level, Briggs ran for one of the Suburbans, but his contractors were scattered, engaged with Grayson's fire from above, unable to provide support. Bryn caught him 20 yards from the vehicle. She didn't shoot him, didn't need to. She just tackled him like a linebacker, her smaller frame driving into his knees, sending both of them crashing to the asphalt. They rolled, fought. Briggs was older but bigger, stronger, with the desperation of a man who knew his life was over if he lost. He got on top of her, hands going for her throat, but Bryn had spent 8 years fighting men bigger and stronger than her. She bucked her hips, trapped his arm, rolled into a Jujigatame armbar that would have made her jiu-jitsu instructor proud. Briggs screamed as his elbow hyperextended. His hand opened reflexively. The pistol he'd been trying to bring to bear clattered to the ground. Bryn released the hold, scrambled for the weapon, came up with it pointed at his face. "Don't move." Briggs lay on the ground, cradling his arm, his face twisted with pain and rage. "You can't win. Even if you kill me, even if you destroy my operation, there are others, bigger operations, people with more power than you can imagine. This doesn't end." "Maybe not, but your part in it does." Grayson appeared from the building, his HK-416 still smoking, his face grim. "Contractors are pulling back. We have maybe 5 minutes before they regroup." "Is it recording?" He held up his phone. "Every word, every confession. We have him." Sirens wailed in the distance. Multiple vehicles. Law enforcement, drawn by the explosions and gunfire. Bryn looked down at Briggs. "My father tried to stop you 20 years ago. You killed him for it. Murdered an American hero because he believed in doing the right thing. But he won. Because he had a daughter, and she finished what he started." The first police car screeched through the gate, lights flashing. Then another. Federal vehicles. FBINCIS. Not Caldwell's compromised team, but agents from Los Angeles, clean investigators who Ainsley had contacted through back channels. Special Agent Carlson approached with his weapon drawn, assessed the situation, then holstered it. "Which one of you is Bryn Dalton?" "I am." Lieutenant Graves said you'd have evidence for us. She also said you'd have Colonel Briggs. I'm pleased to see she was right on both counts. He looked down at Briggs with the kind of expression you'd give something unpleasant stuck to your shoe. Colonel Wade Briggs, you're under arrest for conspiracy, weapons trafficking, theft of government property, and murder. You have the right to remain silent. As they hauled Briggs to his feet and put him in cuffs, he looked at Bryn one last time. Your father died for nothing. This changes nothing. My father died fighting for what he believed in, and I'm still fighting. That's not nothing. That's everything. They took him away, loaded him into a car, and drove him toward a future that involved prison cells and public trials and the complete destruction of everything he'd built. Special Agent Carlson returned to where Bryn and Grayson sat on the asphalt. Miss Dalton, we found something else in Briggs' Suburban. A laptop. Encrypted, but our tech guys cracked it in the van. He held up a tablet showing a file directory. Briggs was keeping records. Insurance, probably. Names, transactions, communications. And there's a folder labeled Overwatch. Bryn's blood went cold. What's in it? Carlson pulled up a document. Personnel files, photographs, current addresses. Her name was at the top of the list, but below it were 6 more names. 6 other people who'd gotten too close to Operation Iron Harvest over the years. 3 were marked with red X's, deceased. 2 were marked yellow, monitored. 1 was marked green, neutralized. These people, Bryn said quietly, the red X's, were they accidents? 1 car crash, 1 house fire, 1 suicide by gunshot. Carlson's expression was grim. We're reopening all 3 as homicides. But it was the last file that made Bryn's hands shake. A photograph from 2006, Ramadi, Iraq, her father in full combat gear, standing outside a supply depot. The photo was date-stamped March 15th, 2006, 3 weeks before he died. And in the margin, handwritten in Briggs's writing, Dalton confirmed as threat, forwarded to General V for disposition. Recommend permanent solution. General V. Grayson leaned over her shoulder, read the note, and his face went white. General Vance, he whispered. Major General Theodore Vance. He was Briggs's CO in Iraq, retired in 2015, lives in Virginia now. He ordered the hit, Bryn said. Not a question, a statement. Carlson nodded slowly. We'll investigate, but Vance is connected. Pentagon brass, defense contractors. This goes all the way to the top. Bryn looked at the photograph of her father. Young, alive. 3 weeks away from a bullet that would erase him from her life forever. Then we go to the top, she said, and we burn it all down. Bryn sat down on the asphalt, suddenly exhausted. Grayson settled beside her, both of them watching the organized chaos of a federal crime scene being established. You finished it. That's what matters. That's what he would have wanted. Hammer? Doc called. Surgery went well. Broken femur and some internal bleeding, but he'll make it. And Ainsley? Already at FBI headquarters in Los Angeles, giving her statement. She's probably going to get a promotion out of this. First person to blow open a multi-base corruption ring in 40 years. They sat in silence for a moment, watching the sun complete its descent. The sky turned purple, then black, stars emerging one by one. What happens now? Bryn asked. Now? Federal prosecutors spend the next year building cases. Briggs rolls on everyone to save his own skin. We testify. We watch corrupt officers get perp-walked on national television, and we try to rebuild some faith in a system that failed us. And then you decide who Bryn Dalton wants to be, because you just proved you're as good as your father. Maybe better. The teams would take you back in a heartbeat. Or you could go private. Contractors make good money. Or you could walk away. Find a quiet life somewhere. Be done with all of this. Bryn thought about her father, about the photo of him holding her as a baby, about 20 years of lies and secrets, and a legacy she'd never known she was carrying. I think I want to teach. Teach? Bud/S. Train the next generation. Make sure they're ready for what's out there. Make sure they understand that being a SEAL isn't just about kicking doors and shooting bad guys. It's about doing the right thing even when it costs you everything. Grayson smiled. Yeah, he would definitely want that. 6 months later, Bryn Dalton stood on the grinder at Naval Amphibious Base Coronado, watching a new class of BUD/S candidates struggle through their first evolution. Among them were 3 women, fighting just as hard as the men, refusing to quit despite the cold and the sand, and the instructors who seemed to enjoy creative forms of physical torture. She wore the khaki uniform of a Navy instructor now, her SEAL trident polished and proud on her chest. Rex sat beside her, older but no less vigilant, officially designated as a training aide and therapy dog for the base. The scar on Rex's chest was still pink and puckered where Colton Briggs' knife had found him 6 months ago. The veterinary surgeon at Camp Pendleton had worked for 3 hours to save him. Collapsed lung, perforated diaphragm, enough internal bleeding that they'd needed to transfuse blood from 2 other military working dogs. Bryn had stayed in the surgical suite the entire time, her hands still covered in Rex's blood, refusing to leave until she knew he'd survive. When he'd opened his eyes 12 hours later, groggy from anesthesia, the first thing he'd done was wag his tail. The doctor said he'd never seen a dog with that much fight in him. Bryn knew better. Rex had survived because he still had a mission, still had someone to protect. That's what working dogs did. They kept going until there was nothing left to give. The Navy had awarded him a Purple Heart in a ceremony that made the national news. First military working dog to receive the medal since World War II. They'd retired him with full honors, offered him a position as a therapy dog for wounded warriors at Balboa Naval Hospital. But Bryn had made a different choice. Rex's final mission would be here, on the grinder, showing the next generation of SEALs what loyalty looked like, what sacrifice meant, what it cost to wear the trident. The trials had been everything the prosecutors promised. The Department of Defense investigation into Colton Briggs's death had concluded 3 months ago. Justifiable homicide in defense of others. The ballistics report showed her shot had been taken while Colton stood over a wounded Rex with a knife, having just stabbed a retired military working dog. The video evidence from Grayson's phone showed everything. Self-defense. Clean shoot. The Marine Corps had issued a brief statement. Sergeant Colton Briggs, killed in the line of duty while engaged in unauthorized operations. No further details released. No military funeral. No flag on his coffin. His mother had sent Bryn a letter. Not angry, not accusatory, just broken. I wish you'd met him before his uncle got to him, she'd written. He wasn't always this way. Bryn kept the letter in her desk drawer, a reminder that every person she'd killed to a rifle scope had been someone's son, someone's brother. Human cost wasn't just numbers on an after-action report. Colonel Wade Briggs had been convicted on 37 counts, sentenced to life in federal prison without possibility of parole. Assistant Director Caldwell arrested 3 days after Briggs, pleading guilty to lesser charges in exchange for testimony. 23 other conspirators across 3 military bases and 4 defense contractors facing their own trials. Operation Iron Harvest was dead, destroyed, exposed, but the cost had been high. Doc had lost his medical license for treating Hammer without reporting the gunshot injuries. Grayson faced potential charges for illegal weapons possession and conducting unauthorized surveillance. Ainsley was in witness protection after receiving credible death threats, and Bryn had spent 2 months in legal limbo, waiting to see if the Navy would court-martial her for her actions. In the end, they'd given her a choice: retire with full honors and never speak of it again, or accept a teaching position and use her experience to train the next generation. She'd chosen the latter, because running was what cowards did, and her father hadn't raised a coward. Her phone vibrated. She checked it discreetly. Unknown number. She almost ignored it, almost. But something made her step away from the grinder, walk to a quiet corner of the base, and answer. The voice on the other end was professional, female, carrying the kind of authority that came from high rank. Lieutenant Dalton? Yes, ma'am. Who's calling? This is Admiral Patricia Rawlings, Special Operations Command. I'm calling to discuss an opportunity. We have a situation developing that requires someone with your particular skill set, experience in special operations, knowledge of corruption investigations, and the kind of moral courage that seems to be in short supply these days. What kind of situation? Classified, but it involves weapons trafficking in Eastern Europe. American gear ending up in the hands of Russian-backed separatists. We think it's connected to Operation Iron Harvest, bigger players. And we need someone who's willing to go off book to stop it. Someone who knows how deep this goes. Bryn looked out at the ocean, at the candidate struggling through the surf, at Rex waiting patiently for her return. When do you need an answer? 24 hours. But Lieutenant Dalton, this isn't a request. This is your country asking for your help, the same way it asked your father, and we both know how he answered. The line went dead. Bryn stood there for a long moment, feeling the weight of her father's legacy, the weight of the trident on her chest, the weight of knowing that some fights never really ended. Rex appeared beside her, his amber eyes questioning. What do you think, boy? One more mission? The dog's tail wagged slowly. Bryn pulled out her phone, dialed Grayson. It's me. Just got a call from SOCOM. They want me for something overseas. Weapons trafficking. Connected to Briggs. Bigger network. Are you going to do it? She looked back at the BUD/S candidates. At the young women fighting to earn their tridents. At the future of naval special warfare that she was helping build. I don't know yet, but I know one thing. My father didn't quit when things got hard. He didn't walk away when it would have been easier. He fought until they killed him. And maybe that's what being a SEAL really means. Not the training or the missions or the medals, but the willingness to keep fighting for what's right, even when nobody's watching. That's exactly what it means. So what are you going to tell SOCOM? Bryn watched the sun climb higher over the Pacific, burning away the morning fog, revealing another perfect California day. I'm going to tell them the same thing my father would have said, the same thing every SEAL says when their country calls. I'm going to tell them, yes. She ended the call and walked back to the grinder, Rex at her side, ready to continue molding the next generation of warriors who would face the same impossible choices, the same moral tests, the same legacy of service and sacrifice. Behind her, carved into a memorial wall that she visited every morning before sunrise, was a name. Master Chief John Dalton, Navy SEAL, KIA Ramadi, Iraq, 2006. So others may live. And now, beside his name, fresh flowers appeared every week, placed there by a daughter who'd never really known him, but who carried his spirit in every decision she made. The mission was over. The mission was just beginning. And Bryn Dalton, daughter of a legend, sister to warriors past and future, was ready for whatever came next. Because that's what SEALs did. They finished the fight every single time.